A visitor from the real world, who obtained a jade pendant and the ability to travel between different worlds, has since changed the world. He transformed into a dragon that only existed in a dream in the long moonlight. How should he turn emptiness into reality and walk from illusion to reality? He traveled the rivers and lakes in the snow, and together with Xu Fengnian, he understood heaven and earth, made friends, seduced beautiful women on the rouge list, and achieved the land of immortality. In the Immortal Sword, he slays demons and eliminates them, befriends Shu Mountain cultivators, comprehends the way of heaven and humanity, and achieves the reverence of immortals. In the middle of hiding the sky, he lived from the pre-Qin to the present, and his accomplishments could not be improved. At the end of the law, he suddenly found that the coffin of 9 dragons fell on Mount Taishan, so he crossed the sky and began a song of the universe. P.S. Long moon, bright ashes, snow, immortal sword, covering the sky. Keywords of the novel. All heavens. Starting from long moon Jinming with no pop-ups, all heavens. Starting from long moon Jinming with TXT complete collection download, all heavens. Starting from long moon Jinming with the latest chapter reading. Chapter 1. Awakening. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Awakening. Silent and desolate, this is an extremely cold world. A huge lake, waves crashing against the cliffs one after another. Surrounded by high mountains covered in ice and snow. The thin mist drifted over the lake, and although this water area looked like a lake, it was vast and boundless. This place is extremely cold, with no one around for years, and the living environment is extremely harsh. But Li Yu happened to be in this area, and this time he crossed without even a physical body, becoming a spiritual consciousness floating above the water. Li Yu has been in this world for over a year now. Over the past year, he has been drifting over the water, slowly gathering his shattered spiritual consciousness. After more than a year, Li Yu has also gained a basic understanding of this world, which is an extraordinary world, immortal or fantasy. Li Yu's identity in this life is a person named Minji, and as for what his past was like, Li Yu doesn't know. Because the golden finger he crossed automatically arranged a past for him, that is to say, the time when he woke up was not the time when the golden finger acted in this world. Even before he crossed, the golden finger had brought him into this world, allowing him to be born, grow, and experience the world. Then the golden finger will revive him from a certain period of time. There is a benefit to traveling in this way, which is that it can replenish his previous life strength in this way, and achieve a perfect match between spirit and flesh. But it seems like there was an accident this time. He didn't see his physical body, and even his spiritual consciousness was shattered. This spiritual consciousness is very weak, even if it is completely gathered, it will not increase his strength much. And he can't do anything about gathering spiritual consciousness, he can only wait. Nowadays, Li Yu doesn't even have a human figure, it's just a bright light. On this day, Li Yu stayed on a floating ice on the lake's surface, observing the bottom of the lake. For over a year, Li Yu has been like this, extremely bored. He cannot stay away, and his spiritual consciousness is extremely weak. If he stays away, he will appear in a state of disintegration within a few tens of miles. So the scope of Li Yu's activities is this circular area. During this period, Li Yu visited every part of this area and found nothing. Now there is only underwater water left, and the living environment of this lake is extremely harsh. For over a year, Li Yuling has not discovered a single organism. Now that his spiritual consciousness is about to solidify, he must find a way to leave here. We must find a body, whether it's a fish or something else, and we must give his spiritual consciousness a body to rely on. Otherwise, even if his spiritual consciousness is condensed, within a few hundred miles, he will still appear in a state of disintegration. Li Yu hesitated on the lake's surface for a while before diving into the lake. He thought he would immediately experience a piercing sensation, but he didn't expect that after his spiritual consciousness entered the water, it would be very comfortable, which he didn't expect. However, when one thinks that their original identity is the lord of this water area, Minji, it can be understood. Since this is his dojo, perhaps this lake has an affinity for him and won't harm him. Li Yu was wandering in the lake, which was very deep. Looking down from here, it was like an abyss, pitch black. Although Li Yu is not humanoid now, he has vision, so he can see very clearly. Li Yu drifted underwater not far from the lake for several hours, without any body to rely on, and had no choice but to swim deeper. Li Yu speculated that if there were still living organisms in this cold water area, they could only exist at the bottom of the lake. As it grew deeper, Li Yu's surroundings also grew darker, but fortunately he himself was a ball of light, so not everything was invisible. Under the sea, there is a lot of frozen ice, and bright light can shine far through repeated refraction in such an environment. I don't know how long I've been swimming, but everything around me has become dark. 1 kilometer below the lake, Li Yu saw a huge cave with a faint glow emanating from its opening. Li Yu swam over and arrived at the platform at the entrance of the cave. Li Yu glanced at it and then slowly swam in. The cave is very large, like an underwater dragon palace, incredibly magnificent. Along the way, there were night pearls illuminating the entire cave, illuminating the lights. Half an hour later, Li Yu arrived at the center of the cave. This place is very tall, and the space alone is 100 meters high. Li Yu, who swam into this area, was attracted by a dragon sleeping in the center of the cave. The overall appearance of the dragon is white, with a single horn on its head, whiskers under its jaw, and claws under its belly, exuding a striking resemblance to a dragon. Even more strangely, Li Yu felt a sense of affinity, as if this was his body. Li Yu involuntarily approached slowly, his gaze fixed on the dragon emitting a faint white light in the center of the cave, motionless. As the distance grew closer, Li Yu suddenly had many fragmented memories in his consciousness. When the distance between Li Yu and Jiaolong was less than 10 meters, Jiaolong's body suddenly began to shine brightly. Li Yu's spiritual consciousness was pulled by a mysterious force, flying from the ground into the air, and then entering the sleeping sea of dragon consciousness. A ray of light flashed through Li Yu's blank mind, as if a flood of memories had been poured into it. The sleeping dragon suddenly opened its lantern-sized pupils. Li Yu remembered that this dragon was his body. His name was Minji and he was born into the East China Sea Water tribe. 1,000 years ago, he ascended to the Shangqing divine domain and took over the position of war god 500 years ago, ranking among the 12 gods of Shangqing. As for why he fell asleep here, Li Yu couldn't remember the separation of spiritual consciousness and physical body. Li Yu swam from the ground, swinging his body for over 100 meters, dancing dragons and phoenixes in space. Ong! With a dragon's roar, Li Yu quickly swam out along the exit of the cave and quickly arrived at the lake, then headed straight towards the water surface. Wow! The dragon sets sail and dances in the sky. For a moment, lightning flashed and thunder roared in the sky, and Li Yu danced in the dark clouds. The whole world is shaking. Starting from today, I am the god of war, Minji. A ray of light flashed by, and the dragon transformed into a humanoid and stood in the clouds. Shangqing Divine Domain, Yuqing Palace. A deity dressed in a blue and white immortal robe sat on the main hall, his eyebrows suddenly furrowed slightly, as if sensing something. If Li Yu stood here, he would find that this person was exactly the same as him, not only in appearance, but also in breath, divine power, and even in clothing. What exactly happened? Why is my mind so restless today? The man above the hall frowned as he looked at the starry sky outside the hall. Never mind, the frontline battle matters. Let's go and see when we have time, the man thought to himself. After thinking about it, he lowered his head and flipped through the memorial from the front line. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Divine and Demon Wars. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Divine and Demon Wars. Li Yu lowered the clouds and arrived at the edge of the Beihai Cliff. Watching the waves crashing into the coast one after another, I was stunned. He felt the seemingly endless powerful divine power within his body. All of this is so fantastic. Liu comes from a new world in the 21st century, which was an era of spiritual revival. Liu gained the ability to travel through various heavens and realms through an ancestral jade pendant. This is not his first time traveling, his last world was in Jin Yong's martial arts world. After Liu reached the top of that world, he had the opportunity to travel again and then came here. The power of this world is beyond his imagination. Firstly, it is a mystical world where dragons exist. This is not what he finds most incredible, what he finds most incredible is his current state of mind. According to the ability of the ancestral jade pendant, his body can only obtain the same strength as in his previous life. That is to say, this ancestral jade pendant reincarnates him into this world and allows him to grow naturally. When he reaches the strength of his past life, he will awaken the memories of his past life. The advantage of doing so is that it will not attract the attention of the heavenly Tao. He has become a local creature in this world, participating in the development process of this world and having a past. He was only in the realm of innate masters in his previous world, but now he possesses the power of gods. Liu feels that he can move mountains and fill the sea, summoning wind and rain. This is very abnormal, it shouldn't have happened to him. Liu was wearing a white heavenly robe with a blue ribbon on his shoulder, showcasing his nobility everywhere. The god of war in the upper Qing dynasty is in the dark night, Liu muttered to himself, muttering about his identity. Liu flipped his hand and saw a jade pendant emitting a strange light, with complex patterns on it. Where exactly is the problem? Liu frowned slightly. The powerful divine power in his body, although capable of overturning rivers and seas, also made him feel uneasy. This is not the divine power he cultivated, it appeared out of thin air. At this moment, Liu felt a sense of unreality. Through this powerful magic force, he felt that the whole world seemed like a dream foam, which could explode at any time, and he was just a creature in the illusory space, which made Liu feel a fear. Liu didn't know where the problem was, but he knew there was definitely something else he hadn't noticed. Liu flipped his hand, retrieved the jade pendant, and then looked up at the sky. Immediately, the body turned into a golden light and flew towards the sky. I'm here to see what kind of tricks are there in this world. Liu flew at high speed on the clouds, heading towards the remembered Shangqing divine domain. Since his identity in this lifetime is the god of war in the divine domain, he will go back and take a look. Why did his spiritual consciousness collapse and his physical body lie in a cold sea? What exactly happened before? This is a problem that Liu urgently needs to solve. Only by understanding what happened before his memory recovered can he possibly understand the reason for his skyrocketing cultivation. After Liu left, the lake behind him was like a vast mirror, breaking one after another and finally turning into a colorful starry sky. There are also high mountains covered in ice and snow, and waves of lakes, all of which are illusory. Liu woke up in a void and walked towards another void. Of course, Liu at this time was not aware of this. He is flying at full speed towards the upper clear divine domain. After leaving the far north, Liu crossed a strait and then arrived at the mainland. However, at this moment, the continent is not stable, and the sky is not clear for thousands of miles, but shrouded in dark clouds, with gunpowder everywhere. The battle between good and evil. Liu looked at the two camps of one white and one black on the clouds, and immediately distinguished between the good and evil. Liu stopped, flipped his hand, and a divine halberd appeared in his hand. Liu joined in without hesitation. Help the heavenly soldiers kill those demonic soldiers who emit a demonic aura all over. As Liu waved the divine halberd in his hand, a divine power that looked down on the world erupted from him. The astonishing shock wave quickly spread the mist on the clouds around the center. That divine power seemed to have a discerning effect, and all the demon soldiers affected were killed in the end, while the heavenly soldiers showed no response and only brushed gently past them. The vast sky is filled with smoke and gunpowder, and the flames of war stretch for hundreds of kilometers. Upon seeing this, Li Yu withdrew his divine halberd from his hand and his body turned into a golden light. Then, a dragon, several hundred meters long, with a dragon head as big as a house, appeared in the sky. Li Yu roamed freely on the battlefield, unleashing his divine power to collide with the magical weapons wielding knives and guns. For a moment, there was no one to stop it, and all the magic weapons that were hit were shattered by a single impact. Li Yu walked up and down in the clouds, and in a moment, he penetrated hundreds of kilometers of the battlefield. Tens of thousands of demonic soldiers were slaughtered by Li Yu alone, and there were constantly corpses of demonic soldiers falling from the sky. God of war, God of war, God of war. The demon soldiers were slaughtered to the death, and the sky gradually regained its clarity. The smoke of gunpowder gradually dissipated, and the dark clouds were also dispelled by the scorching sun on the sky. The light once again enveloped the human world. The surviving heavenly soldiers and generals on the clouds cheered with joy as they watched the night god of war constantly churning in the air. Listening to the cheers in his ears, Li Yu did not stop, but instead crawled into a floating cloud in the sky, which turned into a golden light and came to the human world. The sunshine once again shines on the earth, and the world is no longer just like hell, but has transformed into a magnificent scene of birds singing and flowers fragrant, fish soaring and diving underwater. A golden light descended from the sky and landed by the river, transforming into Li Yu. Li Yu stood in front of the mudflat, looking at the big river in front of him like a flat lake. Li Yu stopped because the heavenly soldiers had just shouted at him. They were surprised to see him without any surprise, as if he should have been like this. But before Li Yu, his spiritual consciousness had dissipated and his physical body was silent at the bottom of the lake. It seemed that he had already died, and judging from the degree of desolation in that lake, he had been dead for years. However, the reaction of those heavenly soldiers to him just now seemed like they had just met yesterday. This left Li Yu puzzled, which was also why he neither met those heavenly soldiers nor continued to fly towards the Shangqing divine domain. Who is there? Li Yu's eyebrows and eyes froze as he turned to look at a rocky mountain behind him. Li Yu's divine eyes were like torches, his expression serious as he stared at a certain part of the thatched bush above and below the stone. With the passage of time, Li Yu's right hand has gathered a powerful divine power that may strike at any time. Where are you, Xiao Xiao? Hurry up and come out, otherwise we won't be polite, Li Yu shouted sternly. He was already in a bad mood, and now he has encountered someone peeping at him. Regardless of the reason, it is not something that a righteous person should do. Don't. A crisp and pleasant voice sounded from the foot of the stone mountain, and then a beautiful woman walked out of the crowd of Bameo. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Sangjiu. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3 Sangjiu. I saw the woman wearing a pale yellow fairy dress, with many hairpins inserted into her hair, and her headdress adorned with sparkling pearls, looking stunning. Li Yu glanced at her twice and saw that there was no demonic aura on her body. He no longer cared about her, but turned around to continue contemplating the hundreds of meters wide river. Due to the disparity in strength, Li Yu immediately saw through the woman's identity. A clan spirit, but due to practicing magic, there is no demon aura on its body. Apart from that peerless appearance that stunned Li Yu for a moment, there was nothing else surprising. If it were during his recent travels, he might still have wanted to get to know each other in the past. After all, beautiful girls are pleasing to the eye. But now he has more important things to do and is not in the mood to flirt with the girl. The mulberry vine at the foot of the stone mountain stood at a loss, looking at the dark night by the river with both hands tightly clasped, showing some nervousness. She thought that Minji would ask her a question, but she didn't know that he just glanced at her and stopped paying attention, which made Sangjiu feel a bit at a loss. Sangjiu wanted to meet Li Yu in the past, but he didn't know how to speak up. Looking at the tall and handsome figure, Sangjiu finally suppressed his inferiority complex and leaned over. Li Yu felt the stunning woman behind him approaching, but didn't say anything. Well, hello, my name is Sangjiu. The woman came to Li Yu's side and looked up in fear, stealing a glance at him. Hello, my name is Minji. Li Yu glanced at her and then gave her an answer. Although Li Yu's identity in this lifetime is that of the heavenly god of war, Minji, he does not have any memories of Minji. This is the mechanism of the ancestral jade pendant. In order to protect him, memories before he awakens will be deleted. So at this moment, although Li Yu possesses tremendous divine power, his nature is actually a person with only an innate master realm. He is accustomed to responding to greetings from others. Sangjiu responded to the person she liked, and her restrained expression dissipated without a trace, transforming into a naive and innocent appearance. He looked at Li Yu with great joy and said, "You are the god of war in the heavenly realm, Minji." Listening to this question, although Li Yu didn't really want to talk to her, he still replied, "I guess so." Upon hearing Li Yu admit that he was the Dark Knight war god who had just fought against the demon soldiers in the sky, Sangjiu was very happy. But she suddenly remembered that she had just been peeping, and then lowered her head. "Minji war god, I didn't mean to peep at you just now. I was just watching the war between gods and demons in the sky. If this has caused trouble for war god, I'm sorry." Li Yu, who was frowning and thinking about things, smiled slightly when he heard the little girl's words and then looked at it and said, "It's okay." Looking at Li Yu's smile, the haze on Sangjiu's face was swept away, and sunshine appeared. "Thank you. All right, you go home. Remember not to come out in such a dangerous time in the future," Li Yu said to the woman beside him, then turned into a golden light and flew towards the sky. Ming. Watching Li Yu leave, Sangjiu couldn't help but want to speak up, but in the end, he didn't shout out, just watched him leave reluctantly. "Ah Jiu, what did you do? Why are you so happy?" At the bottom of the Mo River, the Water Clan Palace was bustling with mulberry wine as they arrived at the entrance, their faces filled with joy. A man dressed in splendid attire walked out of the palace and looked at Sangjiu, asking. As soon as he saw the person coming, Sangjiu stopped immediately. Although his face was still covered in laughter, he no longer bounced around. "Brother, I can still go there, but I'm just walking outside." Sangjiu didn't want to tell the truth, so he casually lied. The young man looked at his younger sister and although he knew she hadn't told the truth, he didn't ask again. Instead, he said, "Father, let me tell you that the gods and demons have been fighting in the sky over the Mo River these days. It's too dangerous outside, so don't go out." "Got it, brother." Sangjiu walked over and supported the young man's arm, playing coquettish. All right. The young man looked at his sister and shook his head helplessly. "Let's go back with me to see father." The young man walked into the palace holding mulberry wine. Shangqing Divine Domain, the main hall of Yuqing Palace. War god Minji sat on the main hall, looking at the memorial on the desk, handling frontline affairs. "I see the god of war below." Several heavenly generals wearing golden armor walked in from outside the main hall. "What's up?" Minji put down the memorial in her hand and raised her head. "My colleagues and I are here just to thank the god of war for his life-saving kindness." Jin Jiatian knelt down on one knee, glanced at each other, and then held hands and saluted to Minji above the main hall. "The grace of saving lives." Minji frowned. "Where did this matter start?" Minji asked inexplicably. "Your Highness, you just killed the demonic soldiers and saved our lives. Your Highness may think it's just your duty, but for us, it's a great favor," said the three Jin Jiatian generals. "Why have I never heard anyone talk about the war?" Minji suddenly stood up from behind the table and asked the three heavenly generals below the main hall. "What is the current situation of the war?" Minji walked around the desk and asked in front of the three people. The three golden-armored heavenly generals who knelt down on one knee looked at each other in confusion, and then the heavenly generals led by them said, "The demonic soldiers have been killed and retreated by the god of war. Don't the god of war remember? Did I kill you?" Minji frowned as she looked at the three of them in confusion. Not bad, the three of us, as well as tens of thousands of heavenly soldiers, saw it clearly. The demon soldiers were completely killed by the god of war. But I haven't received any news of seeking help, and it's even more absurd for me to kill the demonic soldiers. I've been staying at Yuqing Palace to handle affairs from all directions, how could I possibly go to Mo? Minji said. When Minji said this, the three golden-armored heavenly generals also felt a bit flustered and puzzled. After discussing with each other for a while, the three of us said, "Report to the god of war. We have indeed seen the god of war, and tens of thousands of heavenly soldiers have seen his divine power. If the god of war does not believe us, you can ask someone else." Minji frowned slightly and looked at the three of them, unable to think of a reason for a moment. "You said you once sent someone to ask for help from me, did the person who asked for help bring it?" "Report to the god of war, that person is my personal guard and is currently outside the palace. I can allow him to enter the palace for his highness to inquire." "Go ahead." Minji waved his hand and then turned around to sit on the throne behind the desk. "My humble duty, see your highness." "Get up." Minji glanced at the heavenly soldier below the main hall and said. "During the battle between the gods and demons, Lu He, the divine general, once sent you to seek help from me. Is there such a thing?" Mingyi looked at the silver-armored heavenly soldier standing under the main hall and asked. "Your highness, there was indeed this matter. At that time, his comrades suffered heavy losses, but there was an endless stream of demonic weapons. Lu He, the divine general, saw that the war was not going well and sent me to seek your highness's help." The silver-armored heavenly soldier respectfully replied. "But why haven't I seen you before? When did you say you asked me for help?" Minji asked. "Report to your highness that I have not arrived at Yuqing Palace." "Where did you ask for help from me?" Minji answered solemnly. "At that time, I had just set off for a quarter of an hour. Shortly after leaving the battlefield, I heard the roar of dragons behind me. I thought your highness had arrived, so I turned around and rushed back to the battlefield, continuing to fight with the demon soldiers until your highness killed all the demon soldiers," said the silver-armored heavenly soldier. "Lu He, as you just said, tens of thousands of heavenly soldiers have all seen this constellation." Minji looked at Jinjiatian and said. "Yes, your highness," said the golden armor divine general. "What's going on here?" Minji frowned and thought about it behind the desk. The heavenly generals below the main hall, unsure of what had happened, spoke up and asked, "Your highness, but there was a mistake in our response." "It's none of your business, okay, you guys go down," Minji waved her hand and said to them. "Thank you, your highness." Although the Jinjiatian generals did not know what the Dark Knight War God meant, they still left with doubts. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Yuqing Palace. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Yuqing Palace. Above the 9 heavens, clouds and mist shrouded. A majestic heavenly gate stands tall in the clouds, guarding the endless undulating heavenly palace behind it for thousands of miles. There are 2 heavenly generals wearing golden armor guarding in front of the heavenly gate. A golden light came from the lower realm and landed on the steps in front of the heavenly gate. The divine general guarding the heavenly gate immediately grasped the divine weapon in his hand until the golden light transformed into a human form. See the god of war in the underworld. The 2 golden armored divine generals saw that the person coming was the god of war in the underworld, and immediately bowed and saluted. Li Yu glanced at the 2 of them, then passed through the heavenly gate and entered the Shangqing divine domain. In the divine realm, there is a floating fairy island with a majestic palace above it, surrounded by cranes flying around. Li Yu drove the cloud straight towards the Yuqing Palace in his memory. Along the way, Li Yu met many palace maids, who saw Li Yu in the sky and stopped to salute one by one. Li Yu ignored them and continued towards Yuqing Palace. He wanted to know what had happened and why the people in the heavenly realm had no surprise about his return, even though he had already died before. Yuqing Palace is his god of war mansion, and there should be some clues inside. Li Yufei, with his divine power as deep as the sea, flew quickly across countless immortal islands and finally arrived at an extremely large immortal island. On the island, there are undulating temples, unique and magnificent peaks, and a colorful glow. Fairy grass grows in clusters, and cranes fly around, giving it the appearance of an immortal cave. Li Yu stood on the cloud and glanced at it before falling down. Yuqing Palace. Li Yu stood at the entrance of the palace, looking at the plaque on the door. Just as he was about to enter the palace gate, several golden-armored divine generals walked out. The three golden-armored generals frowned and discussed with each other. As they walked down the steps, they suddenly caught a glimpse of Li Yu outside the hall. Seeing Li Yu's figure, the three of them looked at each other in shock, then quickly walked to Li Yu and bowed to him. "Your Highness, do you have anything else to ask us?" The golden-armored divine general, who was leading the way, clasped his hands and saluted. Li Yu frowned slightly as he looked at the three people standing in front of him. "Have you seen me?" The three golden-armored generals exchanged a glance at each other, indicating that they did not understand Li Yu's question. "Your Highness, what does this mean?" Li Yu watched the three of them ponder for a while, then his gaze passed through the hall door and looked deep into the hall, lost in thought. "All right, it's okay, you guys go down. I'm resigning from my humble position." The three of them bowed and bowed before leaving the place. "What's wrong with your Highness Minji?" The three of them discussed on the way out. "It seems like I've lost my memory." "Shut up, don't ask too much about your Highness Minji's affairs," the golden armor divine general led by him scolded. Li Yu, standing in front of the hall, listened to the voices of discussion in his ears and looked deep into the hall. "Is it because my memory has deviated, or is there another reason?" After speaking, Li Yu resolutely walked into the Yuqing Palace. Although the experiences during these few hours told him that entering here may encounter things he finds difficult to control, Li Yu still chose to face them head-on. Because everything now seems so unreal. Firstly, his current strength does not conform to the mechanism of ancestral jade pendant travel, and he has no impression of how he came to this world. Although ancestral jade pendants, in order to protect their hosts, strip away the experiences before their original memories have been revived, they will flash these experiences in cinematic clips in front of them, so that they will not be affected by previous experiences and maintain their true selves, but they will not be blinded by everything. For example, in his previous world, in Jin Yong's world, he was a swordsman who wandered the martial arts world. After joining the Xiaoyao sect, he regained his memory, but he still knew about what happened while wandering the martial arts world. But currently, he knows nothing except that he is the heavenly war god Minji. How did he become the god of war, and what did he experience? He died in the East China Sea. He has already died in the East China Sea, but why are the people in the heavenly realm not surprised by his appearance at all? After entering the Yuqing Palace, Li Yu headed straight to the main hall. Above the main hall, Minji stood at a table and desk, still puzzled by the solution. What exactly happened to all of this? He had been staying in Yuqing Palace all along. Why did those three divine generals claim to have participated in the god-demon war over Mo River and even saved their lives? At this moment, Minji raised her eyebrows and eyes, and suddenly turned around to look outside the main hall. A golden light fell and a divine ruler who was exactly the same as him appeared. One face, the same blue and white immortal robe, the same divine aura. Minji frowned as she looked at herself suddenly appearing outside the main hall. Li Yu, who appeared at the entrance of the main hall, looked over 10 meters into the hall and was shocked to see the person above who looked exactly like him. At this moment, he finally understood what the three divine generals outside the palace had said. It turns out that there has always been a Dark Knight war god in this heavenly realm, and the Dark Knight above the main hall, upon seeing Li Yu, also understood why those three divine generals claimed to have appeared in the battle between gods and demons. Li Yu slowly walked into the main hall. Who are you? Why are you impersonating me? Minji, who was above the main hall, looked at Li Yu below the steps and asked seriously. I am the god of war, Minji, from Yuqing Palace. Who are you? Why did you transform into me and live in my Yuqing Palace? Li Yu asked directly without feeling inferior. The reason why Li Yu was so righteous and imposing was twofold. Firstly, due to the existence of the ancestral jade pendant, he was very clear that his identity in this lifetime was the god of the heavenly realm, the night-standing god. Secondly, after looking at it with his divine eyes, he found that there was another person inside the body of the person in the main hall, emitting an astonishing demonic aura all over his body. Are you Minji? It's ridiculous, Minji shouted above the main hall. After speaking, he concentrated his divine power in his eyes, and then a flash of light appeared in his eyes. How could it be possible? Minji looked at Li Yu below the main hall with an incredible expression in his eyes, because under his heavenly gaze, Li Yu's body was still a dragon emitting immortal energy. Li Yu's body emitted a strange divine light from top to bottom, without any demonic aura. This is impossible. Minji immediately denied. If he himself is not Minji, then he will definitely think that the person in front of him is the heavenly war god Minji, because there is really no visible flaw. At this point, a fierce expression had already appeared in Minji's gaze above the main hall. Because in his mind, he had already determined that Li Yu could not be Minji, so it could only be a demon that had transformed into his appearance. Since it was a demon, his purpose was questionable. And his attitude towards the demon clan is very stable. Li Yu saw that the other party's attitude had changed. With a flip of his hand, a golden light flashed through, and a divine halberd appeared in his hand. I haven't dealt with you yet, but you have been determined to kill first. Since that's the case, let's have a fight and see who is the real Minji. As the leader of the Xiaoyao sect, Li Yu is one of the few cultivators in the world with innate master realm. He has been in the world of Jin Yong for more than 30 years. Even if the world has changed now, not all demons and monsters can make fun of him. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Unreal. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5 Unreal. This seat also has this meaning. Minji's hand on the main hall flipped over, and a divine halberd also appeared in his hand. Li Yu gave a sinister smile, then transformed into a golden light and disappeared into the main hall. The pseudo-dark night above the hall also transformed into a golden light and chased after him. In the sky above, two divine powers that looked down upon the 4 seas and 8 wastelands collided fiercely, stirring up the heavens and earth. The intense divine shock wave struck in all directions, causing frequent vibrations on the celestial islands, resulting in the deaths of countless immortal maidens. That's in the direction of Yuqing Palace. Who is the Dark Knight war god fighting with? How could it cause such a shock? Everywhere in the heavenly realm, the patrolling immortals watched the two forces in the sky, lost in thought. In the clouds, Li Yu urged the magnificent divine power within his body, like a sea of stars, and waved his divine halberd to kill the opponent. Dang! The sound of gold and stone from the collision of weapons is like the roar of ancient abyssal beasts, with indescribable shock absorption. The powerful force was transmitted from the weapon to Li Yu. Li Yu felt a hint of strength that was no weaker than himself, and was somewhat surprised in his heart. I've never heard of such a person before. While Li Yu was surprised, Pseudo Minji was also extremely shocked in his heart. He himself is the god of war in the Shangqing divine domain, and his strength goes without saying, but the other party also has power that can rival him, which is surprising. The figures of the two quickly moved in the clouds, like a beam of light and shadow. Their weapons met, then they quickly retreated, and then quickly met again. Surprisingly, no one could do anything for a moment. Time passed by minute by second, and the divine generals who had already received news from the heavenly realm rushed over one after another. Seeing that he couldn't win for a while, Li Yu frowned. He waved his divine halberd to fight against it while thinking of countermeasures in his mind. The other party has been entrenched in the heavenly realm for a long time, and there must be helpers. Although he is the god of war, Minji, he has just arrived, and if time drags on, it will be detrimental to him. Because although he is the war god Minji, it is the guy from the opposite side who enters and exits the Shangqing divine domain for many years. Therefore, when the time comes, the immortals in the heavenly realm will definitely help him, not him. Li Yu's eyebrows and eyes froze as he looked towards the pseudo-dark knight, who was only 1 meter away from him, fighting for his divine power. Suddenly, he thought of a solution. He suddenly retreated back, then withdrew his divine halberd, stamped his hands, and cast spells at his opponent. Relying on the divine power of the ancestral jade pendant, Li Yu paused for a moment. In the midst of lightning and fire, before the opponent could react, Li Yu's divine power penetrated their body. "Give it to me." Li Yu used all his divine power and shouted with all his might. Quickly, a trace of demonic energy appeared in the divine body enveloped by immortal energy in the pseudo-dark night. "Get out of here." Seeing that the method was effective, Li Yu was overjoyed and mobilized his divine power, pulling the demonic energy out of the opponent's body. After seeing it, Li Yu suddenly retreated. All of this happened between lightning and flint. Just as Pseudo Minji was about to fight back, he saw a demonic aura emanating from his body. He paused for a second, and it was precisely this second that allowed Li Yu to complete the peeling action. Li Yu, who had retreated a kilometer, looked at the figure on the clouds a kilometer away. How could that be? Li Yu frowned when he saw that the other party had no reaction at all. I have already stripped his soul from his body, how could he be unaffected at all? Li Yu looked at the other person with an incredulous expression on his face. Li Yu raised his right hand and looked towards it. I saw a person sleeping soundly in the dark demon's aura. This is not a soul, but a person, Li Yu said incredulously as he looked at the little person sleeping in the demonic aura. This challenged Li Yu's worldview. How could there be another person's body in one person's body? Li Yu's consciousness suddenly fell into a daze. A dream of yellow sorghum, rotten kuchiyuan. Li Yu's consciousness entered another world and saw another world. After a blink of an eye, Li Yu woke up from his dream and looked at the little person in his hand, lost in thought. I am just a consciousness. Li Yu lifted his head and looked at the person across from him with a mix of flavors. I have been dead for thousands of years. No, I don't accept this result. Li Yu restrained his emotions on his face, flipped his hand and took the little person away, then shouted loudly at the dark night a kilometer away. The throne of the god of war in the heavenly realm, Lashizi, belongs to you now. After speaking, Li Yu turned around and turned into a golden light, leaving the heavenly realm. After realizing that he was dead and that this world was just an illusion built in front of him, Li Yu immediately put aside his desire to compete for the position of god of war with the other party. It is meaningless to compete for an illusory position between oneself and oneself. If he didn't know it was okay, but he had already obtained this information from the memory named Dan Tai Jin. So anything he does in this world is meaningless behavior. No matter how much honor he achieves, how high he breaks through, no matter who he falls in love with, in the end, it is all a pipe dream. Since that's the case, why bother arguing? Li Yu, there is something more important to do at this moment, which concerns whether he can come back to life from death and move from illusion to reality. Minji, are you okay? Who is fighting against you, so powerful? Not long after Li Yu left, support arrived. Minji glanced at the Zhe god Jiza, but did not answer his question. Instead, he looked towards the direction of Li Yu's departure with mixed flavors. Whether it's Li Yu's appearance, his divine power and aura, or the demonic energy he just withdrew from his body. All of these made him feel puzzled. How could there be someone in this world who is so similar to him, and what exactly is he stripping away from his own body? Why did he never realize that there was such an existence in his body? After leaving the Shangqing divine domain, Li Yu flew in the sky for another half hour, then casually found a mountain and landed. Li Yu found a cave and then fled into it. Sitting cross-legged on a boulder, he flipped his hand and released the person named Dan Taijin. Li Yu hung the person on his chest, then closed his eyes and his consciousness entered it again. Li Yu saw more clearly this time. He finally figured out his current situation. He is indeed Minji, but the one in the heavenly realm is also Minji, the one he was during his lifetime. He is a dead knight with only one spiritual consciousness that can dissipate at any time. 10,000 years have passed since the era he lived in. The world he was in was just a dream woven by his obsession in front of him, and although Li Yu was in the dark, he only woke up after death. He could no longer change what he was doing in front of him. And he also has the danger of disappearing at any time as the dream disappears. This also explains why, despite having only the cultivation level of an innate master, he possesses the power to look down upon the gods in this lifetime. Because this is the divine power in front of Minji. Although that dark night was also his Li Yu, his memory had not yet recovered, and it could not be said that it was really him. It's just his experience of consciousness in this world. All that he possesses in his body is illusory and not real. If the dream exists, then this divine power exists, and he exists. If the dream dissipates, then he and his divine power will dissipate. Except for the demon body in front of me. Li Yu opened his eyes and looked at Dan Taijin's body, which had returned to its normal size and was sleeping soundly in front of him. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Seize and Give Up. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Seize and Give Up. How could Li Yu be content? Although there were risks in crossing, he never imagined that such danger would befall him. Now that the crisis of life and death lay before him, Li Yu found himself unable to be as calm as he had imagined. He has no realm of the Dark Knight, only the power of the Dark Knight, so he is the Dark Knight, and not the Dark Knight. Minji is him, but he is not Minji. At least after his memory recovers, he has a slight difference from Minji. Li Yu never imagined that such a situation would occur now. He only recovered after his death, and the carrier was just an illusory spiritual consciousness, which could dissipate at any time. His existence is only due to an obsession, the obsession in front of him, but this obsession cannot lead him towards reality. Li Yu had to figure out his own way, and he saw hope in the demon body in front of him. This person named Dan Taijin entered the dream he had created in front of him. Li Yu is not so great. He can do anything for himself, let alone a person destined to be possessed. Since he is destined to be possessed, it's better to give up his body to him. Li Yu's plan is to erase Dan Taijin's consciousness, take away his body, use the ancestral jade pendant to subdue the evil bones in the demon body, feed the demon with his body, and let him condense into flesh and blood. In order to complete this plan, even if he becomes a demon dragon as a result, he will spare no effort. Because compared to the immortal dragons in the illusory world, the magical dragons in the real world are more attractive. Although it may harm the life of this Dan Taijin, Li Yu said there is no way. He comes from the Xiaoyao sect and has always acted according to his heart, not caring about the opinions of the world. The immortal path is vast, and the ghost path is vast. Life is in this world, and if one does not fight, they will die. That is enough to accommodate his bodhisattva's heart. Once the decision was made, Li Yu began to prepare to seize it. Now, apart from this demon body, everything in this world has nothing to do with him. Just let that idiot sink into his dreams time and time again, and the position of God of War will satisfy him. Li Yu is not interested in these illusory things at all. Li Yu flipped his hand and saw a jade pendant in his hand, which was made of sheep fat and white. On the jade pendant, there were auspicious dragons and phoenixes. This jade pendant was passed down from his ancestors. As for where his ancestors came from, he is not sure. He only knows that this jade pendant underwent a transformation in the later generations when spiritual energy was revived. Not only does it possess the ability to travel through different time and space, but it also possesses various supernatural powers, including the cycle of life and death. However, using these functions requires a corresponding cost. Based on these functions, Li Yu immediately thought of the legendary treasure of heaven and earth, the jade butterfly. Legend has it that there are 3,000 paths on the jade butterfly of creation, which can reincarnate 3,000 worlds, and there is also an array of 3,000 worlds. Li Yu suspected that his jade pendant was a fragment of it. Of course, none of these are important. What's important is that this jade pendant can help him achieve the seizure of Dantai Jin and help him subdue its internal demons. With the blessing of Li Yu's divine power, the ancestral jade pendant unleashed an incredible power of creation. Li Yu looked at the silver and white power of creation surrounding the jade pendant, then transformed into a golden light that enveloped the pendant and entered the sea of consciousness of the Dantai ashes. This is a vast and boundless starry sky, empty, with nothing but the starry sky. Standing under the starry sky, Li Yu finally glanced around and threw the jade pendant in his hand, emitting the power of silver and white creation, towards the starry sky. The pitch-black night was flashed by a bright light that cut through the sky. The divine power of creation surrounding the jade pendant instantly spread throughout the sea of consciousness, suppressing the demonic nature deep in the sea of consciousness of Dantai Jin. The demonic bones emanating from the back of the body were also intimidated and could not move at all. The power of creation was too strong, causing Dantai Jin's demonic nature to be imprisoned before it could recover. The entire space is now under Li Yu's control. Now Dantai Jin's body is like a lamb waiting to be slaughtered, allowing him to harvest. Because he was afraid of accidents, Li Yu didn't say much nonsense, but immediately dismembered Dantai Jin's consciousness. Dantai Jin's consciousness was dormant under the starry sky, enveloped by a faint layer of silver light. Li Yu just glanced at him and then activated his divine power to begin dismembering Dantai Jin's consciousness. Under the continuous output of Li Yu, Dantai Jin's consciousness was divided into several parts, and then slowly weakened, becoming a nutrient for the sea. You're bold. In the depths of the sea of consciousness, in an unknown space. A huge head condensed from black air, imprisoned in a cage constructed by divine power, roared angrily as he watched Li Yu's movements. This was the demonic nature within Dantai Jin's body. But no matter how he shouts, it is destined to change the fate that is about to disappear. This demonic nature is also Dantai Jin, but his existence is dependent on the demon bone. However, he and Dantai Jin are both damaged, which means that once Dantai Jin's consciousness goes wrong, he will also die. Li Yu could hear the person scolding, but at this moment he ignored it and focused on erasing the consciousness in the sea of consciousness. After half an hour, the consciousness that was divided into 5 parts shattered at a touch, dissipated in the wind, and became a nutrient for the sea. As Dantai Jin's consciousness dissipated, Li Yu became the master of the sea of consciousness, and this sea of consciousness began to respond to his cries. Watching these changes, Li Yu was overjoyed, but he did not lose his pride and instead proceeded with the next step by step. Li Yu closed his eyes and then activated the divine power inside his body. Starlight flowed and the stars moved around, arriving in another space where it was pitch black and void. Li Yu opened his eyes and waved his divine power, pulling Dantai Jin's soul into this space. A transparent figure emitting light stood in front of Li Yu. An unconscious soul is like a walking corpse, never able to wake up. Li Yu transformed into a ray of light and walked into it, slowly overlapping with the figure. At the moment when the two overlapped, the outer layer of Dantai ashes suddenly transformed into light particles, drifting in space. After all of Dantai ashes dissipated, Li Yu's body began to emit light, gathering the soul particles scattered in space again, and then forming a soul outside Li Yu's spiritual consciousness. After a long time, Dantai Jin, lying on the stone platform, suddenly opened her eyes. Li Yu controlled his body and slowly got up from the boulder. He looked down at his body, filled with joy. Li Yu succeeded, he completed the seizure, and the ashes of Dantai disappeared, leaving only him in the future. Li Yu looked at his clothes and hair, frowning slightly, and then a divine power brushed over him. Li Yu once again regained his appearance as the god of war in the underworld. Wearing a golden crown on the head, wearing the god of war heavenly clothes, and a blue flowing fairy belt surrounding the body. Seeing this appearance, Li Yu nodded in satisfaction. End of this chapter. 7. Chapter 7. Cultivation at the Cottage. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7 Jielu Practice Mo. Li Yu walked out of a stone cave and arrived at the bank of the Mo River, watching sparrows dancing in the sky and fish and shrimp wandering by the river. Looking at the spring and beautiful scenery in front of him, Li Yu's mood was unprecedentedly good. At this moment, he can be considered completely established in this world. Just need to break in with this body, and when the illusion is shattered, he can go out. Li Yu looked at the 100-meter wide surface of the Mo River in front of him. I want to find a dojo to practice hard, and time cannot be wasted. The problem now facing Li Yu is that his fusion with this body is not perfect enough, and it takes time to make up for the details and completely transform this body into his. His body is not the previous one, but a body that has been condensed from the ancestral jade pendant and transformed into Li Yu's body. However, he has never used this body before, so it will take time to adjust. The second thing is that the obsession in front of him is too strong, and he can't leave now. He can only wait for this dream to shatter on its own. Both of these questions require time. And this time, he cannot waste it, he must make use of it. He plans to find a mountain by the Mo River and then create a dojo to cultivate and refine his realm. He is not interested in things in this world because they end up being fake. It's just an experience from before. Instead of that, it's better to practice. In this world, although he possesses the power of gods, his actual cultivation is only in the realm of innate masters. And this world is also a world of immortality and chivalry, and the innate master realm is not very attractive outside, so he must seize the time to cultivate. Upon this thought, Li Yu immediately felt that time was truly precious. Li Yu immediately turned around and went to the mountains to find a suitable cave. Just as Li Yu's figure disappeared into the mountains, the flowing water on the banks of the Mo River suddenly separated from both sides, and a stunning woman emerged from underwater. Sangjiu secretly escaped from his father and brother, just to seize the opportunity that might arise. Since that day, after meeting Li Yu once, Sangjiu, who had returned, could never forget Li Yu's back. Lying in bed, she would long remember Li Yu's figure, think about their conversation, and even smile knowingly. That's it. The god of war of the underworld. Sangjiu casually glanced at the mountain forest, making her gaze just catch a glimpse of the silhouette in the forest. Sangjiu's slightly furrowed brow suddenly unfolded and happily chased towards the direction of Li Yu's departure. The most important purpose of Sangjiu coming out without telling his father and brother this time is to see if he can meet Li Yu again, even if it's just a glance at him from a distance. Because in recent days, gods and demons have been fighting fiercely over the Mo River, and as the god of war in the heavenly realm, Minji often appears. But Sangjiu didn't expect to have the opportunity to get close contact with Li Yu so soon. In front of Li Yu, Sangjiu was somewhat insecure. Although she has the essence of immortality, her cultivation is low and she doesn't know when she can soar. On the other hand, she has already ascended 1,000 years ago and is now the god of war in the heavenly realm. She has made remarkable achievements and holds a prestigious position. If it weren't for last time, Li Yu showed a friendly personality, Sangjiu would never have dared to catch up. Last time, although they didn't talk much, Li Yu's equal treatment attitude opened Sangjiu's heart. The original idea of Sangjiu was to strive for cultivation, in order to ascend to immortality as soon as possible and go to the heavenly realm, so as to possibly get to know Li Yu. But it doesn't seem necessary now. Li Yu, the envoy of divine power, flew over the mountains and forests in search of superior mountains. On both sides of the Mo River, green mountains stretch for thousands of miles, spiritual energy converges, and there are countless caves and blessed places. About half an hour later, Li Yu made the choice. This is a valley with over 100 peach trees in full bloom, fragrant flowers, and a small stream. More importantly, it has a strong spiritual energy, a spacious terrain, and a very Xianjia cave-like appearance. Li Yu lowered the clouds and walked in the peach forest, watching the beautiful scenery around him. With the cool summer breeze blowing, he felt relaxed and happy. That's it here. Li Yu was in the valley, picking from left to right, and finally chose the piece of land next to the river in the valley. Li Yu stood by the pool for a moment of imagination, then prepared to go to the mountains and forests to chop some wood to build a house. Just halfway up the mountain, I heard someone shouting behind me. The god of war in the dark night. Li Yu frowned and then turned to look at the source of the sound, seeing a beautiful figure appearing halfway up the mountain. Sangjiu. Li Yu smiled in surprise. Halfway up the mountain, Sangjiu looked at Li Yu and saw her. He used his powers and soon appeared in front of Li Yu. The god of war in the dark night. Sangjiu, who came to Li Yu's face, felt a bit uneasy, but still happily called out Li Yu's name. Looking at Sangjiu's clenched hands, Li Yu smiled at her and said, Sangjiu, we're meeting again. When Li Yu said these words, Sangjiu blushed and lowered his head, his hands hanging down and breaking his nails. At this moment, Li Yu already knew the fate between himself and Sangjiu, so he knew the little girl in front of him's thoughts on him. Therefore, he prepared to tease her and said, Sangjiu, why are you here alone? Is there anything wrong? No, there is. Sangjiu looked up at Li Yu and said. I looked at the Minji war god as he came towards me, and I thought to myself if there was anything wrong. I was familiar with Mo, so I followed him to see if I could help the Minji war god with something. So it's like this. Li Yu smiled as he looked at Sangjiu in front of him. His smile made Sangjiu even more shy and at a loss for a moment. Looking at Sangjiu, who couldn't lift his hand and couldn't put it down, Li Yu smiled slightly and said he was ready to stop playing tricks. I happen to be building a temporary residence here. If Sangjiu doesn't mind the trouble, please help me with some work. No trouble. As soon as Sangjiu heard that she could be with Li Yu, she immediately raised her hands and waved them. Looking at the appearance of Sangjiu, Li Yu burst out laughing twice and said, Okay, since that's the case, could you please ask Sangjiu to join me in chopping down a few trees? Sangjiu nodded lovingly. Li Yu turned around and took a few steps forward, then suddenly thought of something, so he stopped his steps. However, although he stopped, there was no small mulberry wine following closely behind him, so he directly bumped into Li Yu's back. I'm sorry. The enchanted Sangjiu saw that she had bumped into Li Yu, so she immediately took 2 steps back and apologized to Li Yulian. It's okay. However, Sangjiu, don't call me the god of war of the underworld again in the future. I'm not the underworld, you can call me Li Yu or Brother Yu, Li Yu said. As soon as these words were spoken, Sangjiu frowned slightly. He first took 2 steps back, then stared at Li Yu with those eyes, constantly looking up and down. But you are the night god of war. After looking around for a long time, Sangjiu asked in confusion. I am not the night. You are. I'm not. You are. Sangjiu, why are you so brainless? Li Yu looked at him repeatedly emphasizing that he was Sangjiu from the underworld, feeling somewhat helpless. Because you are the night god of war. I'm not. Li Yu saw that Sangjiu was about to say, you are, so he quickly spoke up and said, if you still call me the god of war of the underworld, then you should leave here. This. Sangjiu looked at Li Yu and suddenly fell into confusion. You can choose for yourself. Do you want to stay here and help me repair the house, or do you want to call me the god of war? Okay, after that mulberry wine, I'll call it Brother Minji Zhanshin Yu. Xiao Sangjiu, you're so good. Li Yu reached out to touch Sangjiu's head, expressing satisfaction, and then turned around to chop down the tree. He wouldn't know, his habitual touch of the head caused great waves in Sangjiu's heart. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Demon God. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Demon God. A day passed, and a thatched cottage rose from the ground in the peach orchard. Looking at the 2 or 3 thatched cottages by the pool, Li Yu nodded with satisfaction. Sangjiu stood beside Li Yu, looking at the house he had built together with the night god of war in front of him. His heart was filled with joy, and the joy was beyond words. Xiao Sangjiu, you worked hard today. Li Yu suddenly remembered the Sangjiu beside him and said. No hard work, no hard work. Sangjiu was very happy to see Li Yu greeting him. Brother Yu, what are you doing building this thatched cottage for? Sangjiu accompanied Li Yu as he pushed open the door and entered the room, looking at the brand new house in confusion. Stay, Li Yu replied without hesitation. Stay. Don't you need to go back to the divine realm? Sangjiu asked inexplicably. I may have to stay here for a while, Li Yu thought for a moment and then said. Upon hearing Li Yu's words, although Sangjiu didn't understand why he wanted to live here, he was very happy. The smile couldn't be concealed, and my gaze was fixed on a certain part of the house, as if I was imagining something. Li Yu glanced at Sangjiu unintentionally and couldn't help but smile at her appearance. Xiao Sang liquor, ah. What are you thinking? Why are you so happy? Li Yu joked. I thought. Nothing. Sangjiu quickly denied. Brother Yu, can I come and play with you in the future? Sangjiu looked at Li Yu with a sincere and eager expression. Li Yu faced Sangjiu's beautiful eyes and pretended to ponder for a while before saying seriously, sure. Upon hearing Li Yu say it was okay, Sangjiu immediately fell out of joy and immediately held her mouth in her hand, looking at Li Yu with some embarrassment. Brother Yu, it's getting late now. I need to go back, otherwise my father and brother will definitely worry about me. Sangjiu glanced at the west-leaning Jinwu outside the house and immediately found an excuse to leave. Li Yu looked out the door at the childish and lively little mulberry wine, and smiled slightly. This little mulberry wine can be considered as a lubricant for Li Yu's boring life. He may have to stay in this world for a long time, so having mulberry wine as a pistachio is also good for chatting. Not long after Sangjiu left, the sky slowly darkened. Li Yu stayed inside the room, sitting on a piece of dough, and began to meditate. For these past few days, Sangjiu came to play with him early every day. Li Yu saw that Sangjiu had nothing to do, so he taught her to practice. Time passed quickly, and in the blink of an eye, it was half a month later. On this day, over the Mo River, the gods and demons once again ignited a war. Magic mist spreads across the sky, blocking the sky and the sun, leaving the sun and moon without light. Smoke rises everywhere, war spreads, and broken flags fall from the sky. A foul smell of blood drifted in the air. Go to Yuqing Palace and report to the Dark Night War God. The demon god is approaching, and the Mo River is about to fall. On the sky, the divine general stationed on the line of the Mo River looked at the increasingly fierce battle ahead and immediately said to the guards beside him. After giving orders, I also rushed to the battlefield and fought against a constant stream of demon soldiers. The war between the gods and demons was astonishing in power. Countless monsters on both sides of the Mo River closed their doors and dared not go out, fearing that their lives would be harmed. Mo Underwater Palace. Sangjiu bypassed the guards on duty and secretly slipped out of the palace, heading towards the shore. These days, his father, King Qian, has reminded Wan to stay in the palace well and not go out. But Sangjiu couldn't help it, especially today. He heard that the demon clan had once again ignited war and attacked the divine clan. As the god of war in the heavenly realm, Minji would definitely stand at the forefront. Sangjiu was worried that Minji would encounter danger, so he wanted to go out and take a look, even if it was just a glance from a distance. Sangjiu sneaked ashore and hid at the foot of the rocky mountain where he often played. He crouched behind a patch of thatch and looked diagonally at the sky. The dark night she was longing for was now killing all directions in the sky, with unparalleled divine power shining brightly in the pitch-black sky. However, in the eastern sky, a burst of thunder suddenly appeared, followed by a huge black cloud that stretched for thousands of kilometers. Accompanied by the roar that seemed to come from thousands of years ago, a huge red arm stretched out from the black mist. That is a statue of the immovable King Dharma, 1,000 kilometers in size, slowly emerging from the black mist, burning with flames all over, emitting an unparalleled aura. Under the influence of the Dharma, 9 dragons appeared pulling carts. Behind the 9 dragon horses, there were 9 iron ropes stretching deep into the black mist. As the 9 dragon horses approached, a huge carriage gradually appeared in the black mist. Sitting on the carriage was a demon god emitting a terrifying aura. Da-da-da-da, in the sound of horse hooves, the fighting sound of the gods and demons seemed to have stopped, and only the drumming sound of horse hooves remained on the sky, revealing the majesty of the demon god. Minji, who was fighting on the battlefield, also stopped his movements and looked at the distant Dharma Master and the demon god under the Dharma Master. The meeting between the masters of the good and evil sides did not take place in the plot of a cliché novel, each with a few vulgar words. Minji looked at the invincible demon god, held his war god halberd, and urged his entire divine power to thrust towards the demon god. The demon god didn't say much, but directly controlled the aerial mage and the dark knight to fight together. For a moment, the two of them were in a tumultuous battle in the sky, with no light from the sun and moon. Wherever their power spread, both the gods and demons were on the verge of collapse, bleeding on the spot. Minji looked at the decreasing number of heavenly soldiers on the sky, feeling extremely angry. He waved the war god's halberd, transformed into a golden light, and thrust towards the demon god with all his might. The movement speed of Minji was very fast, and the golden light flashed by and it was already several kilometers away. With Minji's waving, the war god halberd directly pierced through the magic of the demon god and came close to him. The demon god stimulates magic and resists with all his might. 2 forces, one gold and one red, form a barrier at the junction of weapons, and the shockwave spreads in all directions. In the end, Minji was defeated, pushed back thousands of meters by powerful magic, and a surge of divine blood gushed out of his chest. The demon god didn't say much nonsense, but prepared to kill with one strike, and immediately summoned the slaughtering crossbow, pointing to the dark night in the sky. Death. The demon god pointed towards the dark night. In a simple sentence, the Tushan crossbow was filled with bowstrings, and a continuous stream of magic condensed like an arrow shooting towards the dark night. The magical bow and arrow emitted by Tushan crossbow was like a missile with guidance function. Although Minji had been trying hard to avoid it, there were too many bows and crossbows to avoid, and one arrow pierced through his chest. Pushi, the chest was shattered, the pressure suddenly changed, and a burst of hot blood spurted out of the mouth. The magic carried by the Tushan crossbow and arrow entered the meridians of the underworld through the wound, beginning to corrode his body. Due to being pierced by an arrow through his heart, Minji fainted in a daze, his war god halberd slipping from his fingers, and his body falling from the sky. Bang! A splash of water splashed and quickly sank into the bottom of the Mo River. After Minji was killed, the heavenly soldiers on the sky retreated very quickly, and in just 15 minutes, they were completely slaughtered by the demon clan. The entire Mo River has been declared lost, and the demon army is about to advance to the Shangqing divine domain. Hiding at the foot of the stone mountain, constantly paying attention to the mulberry wine in the dark night, he suddenly stood up from behind the bushes and headed towards the Mo River with a worried expression. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Fate. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Fate. On the east bank of the Mo River, a peach orchard is located 100 miles deep. Li Yu watched as the battlefield gradually quieted down on the sky, enveloped in a demonic aura that enveloped the entire sky, especially the demon god with a demonic bone and the destructive power that destroyed the sky and earth. Despite being hundreds of kilometers apart, he could still clearly feel it. From this, Li Yu thought of the demon bone sealed inside his body with his ancestral jade pendant. The demon god on the sky, no matter how powerful, is also history, but this part of his body is real. Li Yu looked at the gradually dissipating demonic aura in the sky, lost in thought. Then, he saw the first mock examination that fell down from the sky quickly. My poor little mulberry wine. After all, I will still go through a love crisis, sighed Li Yu. Unfortunately, no one will talk to me anymore. Li Yu turned around and walked into the pavilion by the pool, looking very regretful. Although we only spent half a month together, Li Yu really likes the personality of this little mulberry wine, which is also his type. No wonder he likes her in front of him. If the current scene is true, perhaps Li Yu will go and stop it. However, it was ultimately false, and his prevention had no meaning. Li Yu is just a pity. After Sangjiu left, no one spoke to him in this peach orchard. That silly kid is really lucky to be liked by such a little girl, Li Yu sighed, not sure if he was lamenting whether he woke up too late or if she died too early. Li Yu felt a little depressed because Sangjiu couldn't come, but he didn't take it too seriously. After the end of the war, Li Yu returned to the practice room, entered the sea of knowledge, and continued to deduce his own martial arts. All that he has now is illusory, and even if he goes out, he won't be able to unleash it. His true strength now is the innate master realm, and his major martial arts is the eternal Changchun skill of the Xiaoyao sect. This martial arts technique is obtained by his master Zaiyozi from Changchun Valley, which has the nature of immortality. But that's all for now. Besides being able to prolong life, it is actually within the realm of martial arts. What Li Yu wants to do now is to use his insights from this lifetime to see if he can push forward and break through the realm of a master, truly entering the extraordinary realm. Just as Li Yu was hiding in the peach blossom land, the innocent little Sangjiu rushed and finally arrived at the bottom of the Mo River where Minji had fallen, and saw Minji, who was already on the brink of death. Brother Yu, wake up, wake up. Sangjiu knelt beside Minji and helped him up from the ground. Sangjiu saw that Minji was still in a coma, so he used the immortal power in his body to investigate the condition of Minji's body, and soon received feedback from the immortal power. The meridians in Minji's body have been eroded and fragmented by the demonic energy, and all 5 organs are in a state of premature aging. The heart has been pierced by an arrow, and the overall situation is very poor. Just as Sangjiu was preparing to lift Minji away from this place, a golden light flashed in the distance and quickly approached them, transforming into a figure. This person is dressed in an ethereal heavenly robe, with a golden snake crown on his head, a tall figure, and a stunning goddess-like appearance. Minji, Minji, what's wrong with you? As soon as the woman appeared, she rushed to Minji's side and snatched her from Sangjiu's embrace, holding her in her arms and shouting with a worried expression on her face. Sangjiu looked at the sudden appearance of the goddess for a moment, then immediately reacted and knew that she might be a fairy from the heavenly realm. Brother Yu. The damage to the Minji war god is very serious and requires early treatment. Sangjiu originally intended to call Minji Yu brother, but when she thought of someone else present, she felt embarrassed to call and instead used Minji's honorific name. Holding Tian Huan from the underworld, my heart was filled with the safety of the underworld at this moment, without paying any attention to the changes before and after the mulberry wine. Tian Huan held Mingyi in her dying state and felt extremely sad in her heart. At this moment, the heavenly realm has been attacked by demon soldiers, and we have demon soldiers chasing after us. We can find a doctor there for treatment. Sangjiu glanced at the approaching magical aura on the water surface, pondered for a while with a calm and conflicted expression, and finally made a decision. Come with me, I know a place that is both safe and can help the Dark Knight war god stabilize his injuries, Sangjiu said indifferently. Holding Minji and crying on the ground, Tianhuan looked up at Sangjiu, then turned back to look at the demon weapon about to catch up. After a moment of contemplation, he followed the mulberry wine towards a certain point in the Mo River. Although he doesn't know Sangjiu, what if he doesn't want to believe her in this situation at the moment? So, thinking that Li Yu was the knight of the underworld, and that the knight of the underworld was Li Yu's mulberry wine, she once again embarked on her fateful fate. Sangjiu and Minji arrived at the place where the ice crystals were placed in Mo Town. This place has a strong spiritual energy, which can protect Minji's injuries from further deterioration. After Sangjiu brought the two of Minji to the place where the Jinhe ice crystal was placed, he kindly offered to go out and lure away the demon weapon, just like she did in front of her. Everything was as planned. After Sangjiu left, Tianhuan saw that Minji's injury continued to worsen, so she focused her attention on the Jinhe ice crystal behind her to maintain stability in the Mo River. Tianhuan, like in the original work, took out the Jinhe ice crystal and put it into Minji's body, while she herself fainted due to the backlash caused by taking out the Jinhe ice crystal. Everything has gone towards fate. In this dream woven by the obsession of the Dark Knight, except for Li Yu, everything moved towards its original form. After a few hours, the sky will dim. Taoyuan. Li Yu opened his eyes. Li Yu looked at the blooming lotus flowers in the river pond, and at the huge swimming fish under the lotus leaves, which appeared golden in the sunset. Thinking of the past few hours, Li Yu sighed slightly. At this moment, Shaoxang wine should have already met that Minji, Li Yu thought. Li Yu himself is Minji, and he also knows the ending of Minji. He knows more about the ending of his life with Sangjiu. That's why he sighed. What a good girl, what a pity. Li Yu shook his head again as he looked at the sun in the west. Li Yu sighed once again, then forgot about it and prepared to continue practicing. Although he is currently in a dream and his divine power is also fake, as long as he is in this dream, it is true. So he used his divine power and realm to deduce the future of the immortal Changchun, and the result was very pleasing. Although it hasn't been long, he has come up with some ideas and knows how to proceed with the future of Changchun Gong. Li Yu got up from the pavilion and then returned to the house, sitting cross-legged on a cattail, preparing for a deeper level of cultivation. End of this chapter. 10, Chapter 10. No Misfortune. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. No Misfortune. After Jinhe ice crystal left the formation I, the stable Mo River immediately shook and stirred up towering waves. A force that cannot be restrained collides everywhere at the bottom of the Mo River, causing earth to shake, rocks to fall, and water to flow rapidly. The creatures living underwater have suffered a great disaster. In the face of the great power of heaven and earth, everything appears so insignificant. Countless Mo water races were hit by stones, swept away by water hoses, and their underwater palaces and caves were hit by powerful shockwaves. Father, what exactly happened today? How could Mo be so turbulent? The eldest son of the Clam King frowned and went to the palace to ask his father. Old Clam King, also shaken by the earthquake, stood unsteadily, trying his best to control the shaking while frowning and pondering. Is there something wrong with the Jinhe formation? Let's go and take a look. Old Bing suddenly thought of the formation set up by the ancestors of the Shui tribe 10,000 years ago to conquer the violent Mo River. Bang bang bang, the stone pillar was washed away by the water flow and collapsed with a loud bang. The ground cracked and formed a huge crack, causing countless unprepared creatures to fall into the abyss and lose their lives. Old Bing King, along with his eldest son and several guards, arrived at the eye of the Jinhe formation. From afar, the Clam King had already seen that the container for placing the Jinhe ice crystals had become dim and lifeless. Indeed, there is a problem here. At this time, the old Bing King had not yet seen Minji and others sitting in the forbidden area healing their wounds, so he thought it was a problem with the formation eye, as long as it was corrected. Quick, there's a problem with the Jinhe formation. We need to go over and repair it immediately, Otherwise it may be difficult for our Mo water clan to survive safely today. The old Beng king pointed to the lotus-like container in the forbidden area and said to his eldest son beside him. Sangjiu supported his elderly father, resisting the biased force brought by the earthquake, and walked towards the forbidden area with difficulty. After the old clan king and his group arrived at the forbidden area where they placed the guarding ice crystals, they immediately saw the dark knight sitting under the container, meditating and healing. The old clan king looked seriously at the faint light on Minji's chest, and then looked up incredulously at the empty container behind him. The old clan king shook off his son's support and angrily pointed at Minji, saying, "He took the Jinha ice crystal." When Lao Bengwang said this, everyone, including Sangjiu, turned their gaze to Minji. At the moment when Sangjiu saw Minji, he recognized him and his eyebrows and eyes froze. Dark Knight God of War. Feeling the increasingly violent Mo River, Sangjiu didn't hesitate about why he appeared in his own forbidden area. Instead, he looked at his father and worried, "Father, the Mo River is becoming more and more restless. I'm afraid it won't be long before it turns into ruins. Is there any way to temporarily seal the Mo River?" The body of the old clan king was swayed by the impact of the earthquake, but he still struggled to control himself and keep standing. Upon hearing his son's question, the old clan king pondered for a while before sighing. This Shinha ice crystal is the eye of the formation. Without the eye of the formation, the Jinha formation becomes meaningless and cannot suppress the restless Mo River. The only way now is to suck the Jinha ice crystal out of his body while he hasn't fully absorbed it, said the old clan king, pointing to Minji as if talking about an insignificant person. After speaking, he will take action. Sangjiu saw that his father was about to take action, so he quickly blocked him and said, "Father, this person is the god of war in the heavenly realm, with a respected status. If there is a mistake here, the divine race may not easily give up afterwards. At this moment, there are still many things that can be controlled there. If the guardian Bing Jing does not return to his position for a moment, Mo River, will suffer tens of thousands of more lives. I am the lord of Mo River, and his life and death are nothing to do with me." The old clan king retorted, then pushed away his eldest son who was helping him, and began to cast spells to retrieve Bing Jing. "Don't do it." Just as the demon power of the old clan king was about to touch the Dark Knight, Sangjiu suddenly appeared and blocked in front of the Dark Knight. Seeing his daughter appear, the old clan king immediately withdrew his demonic power. "Ah Jiu, what are you doing?" "Dad, don't hurt her." Xiao Sangjiu stood in front of Minji, pleading with his father. "Ah Jiu, father knows that you have a good impression of this person, but this thief has entered my forbidden area, stolen my precious treasure, and caused my Mo water clan to suffer countless deaths and injuries in today's great disaster. Do you still need to protect him today?" "Dad, it's all my fault. I brought him here, please forgive him. I will bear everything alone." "Can you bear it? The ice crystals are lost, the Mo River is raging, and the aquarium is being robbed. Do you know how many people have died as a result? Do you also know that you are the princess of my Mo River? You have a natural responsibility to protect the people of the Mo River, and you still have me as your father." The old Beng king looked sternly at his daughter and said. Xiao Sangjiu looked up at the surroundings, watching the collapse of the stone pillar, the falling of the stone, the cracking of the ground crack, and the Mo River who had suffered a great disaster. He was speechless when asked for a moment. "Sangjiu, come over quickly," the old clan king finally shouted. Xiao Sangjiu lowered his head and said, "Dad, you're right. It's all my fault. Since I made the mistake, I should take responsibility." Xiao Sangjiu slowly got up and then came to the container containing the sick ice crystals. First, he turned his head to take a look at Mingyi, who was in a coma. Then, without hesitation, he suspended himself and shaved off the immortal essence inside his body. "Ah Jiu, what are you doing?" Watching Sangjiu spew blood as he took out the fairy marrow, old Bengwang and others shouted and tried to stop him, but it was ultimately one step too late. When he caught Sangjiu from the air, the fairy marrow of Sangjiu had already entered the formation. Like fate, Sangjiu still made this choice, at the cost of giving up his ascent, replacing the ice crystals with immortal marrow in order to save the life of Minji. A few days later, Old Clam King, seeing that his daughter really likes the underworld, even if he loses his immortal essence and cannot ascend for life, he must save him. Although Lao Beng Wang was not angry and mourned her misfortune, he also decided to fight for her. Sangjiu is the child that Old Beng King loves the most. Since she really likes the dark night, Old Beng King cannot turn a blind eye to it. In addition, his own daughter gave up her future for him this time, and he took all the benefits, while mulberry wine had nothing. As a father, he felt extremely uncomfortable. So even though there is a big gap between his daughter's identity and that of Minji, he still has to grit his teeth and fight for it, even if it means risking being accused of seeking revenge. As in the original drama, although the night after waking up explained everything that it was not the ice crystals he stole, it was ultimately useless. Because although he didn't mean it, the ice crystals were eventually absorbed by him, and the mulberry wine was punished for not being able to soar and only being a demon for life. It was indeed his fault, and it was reasonable for the Old Clam King to make a request for it. So although he was extremely unwilling, the Clam King insisted that he could only agree to the request for a marriage alliance. End of this chapter.